I hadn't been home for Christmas in 5 years. Life kept getting in the way, jobs, relationships, excuses. This year, though, something pulled me back. A sort of quiet guilt maybe. I booked a last-minute flight, didn't even tell anyone. I thought it'd be a surprise. When I stepped out of the Uber and saw the house, everything looked the same. Snow blanketed the yard, the porch light was on, and a plastic reindeer still stood leaning near the bushes, just like it had when I was a kid. But inside it was silent. No smell of cinnamon, no wrapping paper chaos, no half-burned candles or my dad's off-key humming. Just cold air and quiet floors. I called out, "Mom? Dad?" Nothing. My voice felt too loud. And then I heard the soft clink of a fork on a plate. In the kitchen, sitting by the window with a Tupperware of mashed potatoes, was Grandma Ruth. She looked up and blinked like she was trying to make sure I was real. "Well," she said, "you finally showed up." I laughed, but it caught in my throat. "Where is everyone?" She didn't answer right away. Just took another slow bite and motioned to the counter. There was a folded note resting next to the coffee machine. My name was on it in Mom's careful cursive. I opened it with cold fingers. "David, we're at Aunt Carol's. Emergency trip. Grandma refused to go. We didn't know if you'd come. Hope you do. There's food in the fridge. Merry Christmas. Love, Mom." I stared at the words like they might change if I waited long enough. Aunt Carol lived 2 states over. It wasn't exactly a casual trip. "She didn't want to fly," I said, nodding toward Grandma. "She said if she dies on a plane, she'll haunt whoever bought the ticket," Grandma said, wiping her mouth. I smiled, but there was a lump in my chest. I sat down across from her. "You've been here alone all day?" She shrugged. "Wasn't expecting company." The light outside was fading into that cold blue December hue. Inside, the kitchen felt suspended in time, a room from my childhood, untouched and waiting. I opened the fridge. Half a ham. Roasted carrots. Pumpkin pie a little caved in the center. I heated up a plate. We didn't talk much at first. Just ate. She chewed slowly, watching the snow. I watched her, quietly stunned by how small she'd gotten. After a while she said, "Your grandfather used to carve the ham too thick. We'd argue about it every year." I chuckled. "I remember." "He'd be glad you came back," she said. Then softer, "So am I." And that was it. No big reunion. No tearful speeches. Just 2 people sharing leftovers in a quiet kitchen, while the world outside kept snowing. Later she made tea. We sat in the living room, the fake tree still half decorated. I didn't realize I'd started crying until she handed me a napkin. "Sometimes," she said, "Christmas is just showing up." I nodded, unable to say anything. And somehow, that quiet night, just me, Grandma, and the hum of the heater, felt more like Christmas than any I could remember. I stayed the night. Didn't plan to, but after the tea and the silence, it didn't feel right to leave. Grandma insisted I take Grandpa's old room. Still smelled faintly of aftershave and cedar. The sheets were stiff, tucked military tight. I laid there a long time, staring at the ceiling, listening to the wind push against the house. At some point I must have dozed off. I woke early, before the sun, and found her already in the kitchen, humming tunelessly as she poured coffee into 2 chipped mugs. "Didn't sleep much?" I asked. "Don't need to anymore," she said, sliding a mug toward me. "Sleep less, remember more. It's a trade." She poured cereal into a bowl but didn't touch it. Just sat, staring into the steam of her coffee like it might give her answers. "You're not really alone here, are you?" I asked quietly. She looked at me. For a long moment she didn't blink. Then, "Most days no. But some days? Yeah." I didn't know what to say to that. I didn't want to say something false. So I just nodded. Later that morning I helped her down into the basement. She said she wanted to check on the boxes. It smelled like dust and old glue. The air was dry and sharp. We opened a few containers, ornaments, tangled lights, brittle newspaper clippings from decades ago. At the bottom of one was a VHS tape labeled David's First Christmas. I didn't even know we still had a VCR. She smiled like she'd just found a treasure. We brought it upstairs and plugged it into the TV. The screen flickered, static giving way to a grainy version of my dad, 20 years younger, lifting me into the air like a trophy. Everyone was there. Mom, Grandpa, even Aunt Carol, laughing in her ugly sweater. I don't know why, but the moment broke something open inside me. I suddenly wanted to go back in time. Not to change anything, just to stand in the corner and watch. One more hour in that old living room. One more argument over who got the last roll. "Time's a thief," Grandma whispered, watching the screen. I glanced at her. She wasn't crying. just watching like it was news footage, something already lost. We watched the whole tape. Then she asked if I wanted to help her bake something, said she used to make peppermint bark every year, but her hands didn't like the cold anymore. So I crushed candy canes while she melted chocolate on the stove. We didn't talk much. But we didn't have to. Before I left that evening, I asked if I could come back for New Year's. She smiled, took my hand. Don't ask. Just do. As I drove away, the house grew small in my mirror, still, silent, brave. I thought about how many holidays we lose not because they're taken from us, but because we give them away year after year thinking we'll get them back later. I knew now, you don't wait for the big moments. You come back for the quiet ones. The leftovers. The snow. The company that doesn't need explaining. And sometimes you come home, not to find what you left behind but to realize what still waits for you. New Year's came faster than I expected. I drove through a sleet storm to get there, windshield wipers barely keeping up, radio playing old songs that made me feel a little too nostalgic. When I pulled into the driveway, her porch light was already on. Same as Christmas. Like she'd been waiting. She opened the door before I knocked. Didn't think you'd make it through that weather. I said I'd come, I told her, brushing snow off my coat. She smiled, but her eyes lingered on my face, like she was checking to see if I meant it this time. The house felt warmer somehow. She had set out 2 little paper hats and a bottle of sparkling cider. I haven't stayed up till midnight in years, she said. We don't have to, I said. She nodded. Good. We sat in the living room again, this time with a blanket over our legs and a fire crackling on the old screen. I showed her photos on my phone, people she didn't know, places she'd never see, and she acted like every picture was precious. You've seen a lot, she said. Not as much as you. No, she said, but you still have time. There was a long pause after that. Not heavy, just full. Around 10:30 she stood slowly and disappeared into the back bedroom. I heard drawers open, a few soft footsteps, then she returned with a worn cardboard box. Wanted to give you this before I forget, she said, placing it in my lap. Inside were letters. Dozens of them. Some yellowed, some still crisp. All addressed to me in her handwriting. I started writing to you the year you moved out. Thought maybe I'd send them one day, but I never did. I pulled out a random one. The date said January 3rd, 2019. The first line, you probably forgot to eat breakfast again. I couldn't speak. Just held the box close. You don't have to read them now, she said softly. But I wanted you to have them. I will, I whispered. All of them. We fell asleep on the couch. I woke up at 12:17 a.m. to the sound of a firework somewhere in the distance. She was snoring gently, her head tilted back, mouth slightly open. I didn't wake her. I just sat there, watching the way the light from the fireplace danced across the room. I thought about time, not the kind you measure in years or clocks, but the kind you feel passing when someone finally tells you something they've been holding onto for far too long. And in that quiet hour of a brand new year, I understood something simple and sharp. Coming home doesn't fix everything. It doesn't erase the years you stayed away. But it's still worth doing. Because sometimes what waits for you isn't just forgiveness. It's love that never left in the first place. I stayed through the weekend. I didn't plan to, again, but Sunday came and I couldn't bring myself to leave. We fell into a rhythm, the kind you don't realize you're building until it starts to feel like routine. Mornings with toast and quiet news reports. Afternoons spent sorting through boxes in the attic, labeling things neither of us had touched in decades. Evenings with cocoa and old movies half-watched. Grandma didn't say much about the letters. She just nodded when she saw me reading them, 1 or 2 at a time, usually at night. They weren't profound, not really. Just snapshots of a life she kept living while I was gone. Notes about the weather. Her hip pain. A stray cat that visited in spring. My birthday mentioned every year without fail. It wasn't what she wrote, it was that she wrote it all. On Monday, while she napped in the recliner, I went into town to get groceries. Her fridge was full of expired jars and half-used things from last summer. I bought fresh eggs, fruit, tea, things she probably hadn't bought for herself in a while. At the checkout, the clerk asked if I was back for good. I didn't know what to say. When I got home, she was still asleep, a blanket pulled up to her chin. I stood in the doorway and watched her breathe, each rise and fall so gentle I had to look twice. She looked small. Almost breakable. That night, she asked me to bring down her sewing box. Said she hadn't touched it in years, but her fingers were itching. I found it buried in the hall closet, behind old coats and a pair of crutches I never remembered her using. We sat together while she threaded a needle and began repairing a frayed oven mitt. Her hands trembled, but she was patient. Your mom never learned to sew, she said. Too stubborn. Did you try to teach her? She nodded. She wanted to at first, but she hated making mistakes. I smiled. Sounds familiar. She looked at me sharp and knowing. You don't have to be perfect to be present. The room went quiet again. Only the sound of thread slipping through fabric. I think I needed time to understand that, I said. She didn't answer. Just kept sewing, slow and steady. Later that night I wrote a letter back. Just one. I didn't know how to start it, so I copied her. It snowed again today. Then I wrote everything I hadn't said in years. Not apologies exactly, but acknowledgments. Memories. Promises. I slipped it into the box with the others when she wasn't looking. We didn't talk about it. But the next morning when I came downstairs, I found a fresh envelope by my coffee mug. One line. This is a good tradition. She underlined good. Twice. And it was. It really, really was. By the second week of January, the snow turned to ice. Trees looked like glass sculptures, and every time the wind blew, the branches clinked like wind chimes. Grandma said it was the prettiest time of winter, right before everything starts to feel heavy. I started shoveling the walkway without being asked. Made breakfast without waiting. Took over the grocery list, the laundry, even offered to drive her to her doctor's appointment, which she refused. You'll drive me when I can't, she said. Right now I still can. Fair enough. One afternoon we pulled out an old puzzle, a winter scene with a barn and 2 horses. It was missing corners, faded from age. We worked on it for hours. Barely talked. Just passed each other pieces in silence, as if solving it was something sacred. Around dusk she said, "You know what the hardest part of getting old is?" I shook my head. You start repeating yourself. Telling the same stories. And the worst part is, you can't remember who already heard them. I don't mind, I said. Tell me again anyway. She smiled like I'd given her permission to keep being herself. That night she told me a story I hadn't heard before. When your grandpa was sick, I used to read to him, she said. Even when he stopped understanding. Even when he couldn't speak back. What did you read? Anything. Recipes. News. A letter from you once. He liked your voice, you know. I felt a lump rise in my throat. I didn't even know you got my letters, I said. I kept every one. In the bedroom drawer. I still read them sometimes. We sat quietly for a long time. Then I asked, were you lonely back then? She didn't answer right away. Just looked out the window at the frozen trees. Not exactly, she said. I was just waiting. For what? For someone to come back and notice I was still here. Her voice didn't shake when she said it. She wasn't fishing for pity. It was just the truth said plainly. And it landed like a stone in my chest. The next morning I moved my suitcase from the guest room into the attic space. It was cold, drafty, and still smelled like insulation, but it was mine now. When she saw me dragging the box of letters upstairs, she just nodded. You staying a while? She asked. Yeah, I said. If that's okay. She turned back to her tea. Took you long enough. And just like that, without ceremony or fanfare, the house stopped being a place I visited. It became a place I belonged again. Not because anything huge had changed, but because I had. Sometimes love is loud, flashy, full of gestures. But sometimes, it's just showing up every day, for breakfast, for puzzles, for silence. For someone who never stopped waiting. By February we had a routine. Not something we ever sat down and agreed on. It just formed like snow smoothing out the edges of things. I'd wake before her most mornings. Start the coffee. Open the curtains so the light would hit the icicles just right. She'd shuffle in wearing the same wool sweater and mismatched slippers, mutter something about the sun being rude, and sit at the kitchen table like a queen accepting her kingdom's offerings. She started telling more stories. Not the polished ones from birthdays or family dinners, but the hidden ones, quiet memories tucked into corners. Like how she used to ride the bus into the city just to walk around the art museum. Or how she once wrote a poem that won a prize, but she never showed it to anyone because Grandpa said it was a little sad. I still remember every word of it, she said one day, not looking at me. Even now. Will you read it to me? She shook her head. No. Some things aren't for sharing. They're just to prove to yourself you lived. That stuck with me. So I started writing things down too. Not poems. Just moments. The way she tapped her spoon twice before taking a bite of soup. The way she'd say mercy instead of swearing when something fell. How she'd sing little melodies under her breath when she forgot I was in the room. The attic slowly became my space. I put up a little lamp. Found a second-hand desk. Started freelancing again, just enough to pay some bills and feel useful. Sometimes I'd come downstairs and find her sitting in silence, staring at nothing. I never interrupted. I'd just sit with her. And when she was ready, she'd say something small. "Remember that old dog we had with the crooked ear?" And I'd nod even if I didn't, because it mattered to her. And that was enough. One night in early March, the power went out. A tree fell down the street. We heard the crack like thunder, then the sudden hush as everything went black. I grabbed some candles and found her already gathering blankets. "You ever get scared during blackouts?" I asked. "No," she said. "They remind me how quiet the world used to be." We sat in the living room, the candlelight flickering against the walls. I read one of her old letters aloud. Just picked one at random. "There's frost on the windows this morning. I hope wherever you are it feels warm. I miss the sound of your footsteps in the hallway." She closed her eyes as I read, like she was remembering the exact day she wrote it. When I finished, she said, "It's strange, isn't it? What is? How life circles back. You leave and then suddenly you're back in the same chair, eating soup with someone who remembers how you looked at 5 years old. Is it strange in a bad way?" I asked. She smiled gently. "No. It's the best kind of strange." That night, after she went to bed, I sat by the window and watched the snow fall in the darkness. The house was so still I could hear my own heartbeat. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was wasting time. I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. Not saving anything. Not fixing anything. Just being there. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough. Spring came slow that year. The snow melted in pieces, a little each day, revealing patches of dead grass and forgotten tools half buried in ice. The air smelled like earth again. Like something was waking up. Grandma started sitting by the window more often, her chair turned just enough to catch the morning sun. She'd sip her tea with both hands, her blanket bunched at her feet. Sometimes she'd talk. Sometimes she wouldn't. One morning I came downstairs and found the table already set. 2 plates. Toast. Sliced apples. Her handwriting on a folded napkin beside my mug. "Happy you're still here." It was the last note she wrote me. That afternoon she took a nap and didn't wake up. No sound. No struggle. Just stillness. The kind that feels too quiet to be real. I sat next to her for a long time. I didn't cry right away. I just held her hand, it was still warm, and stared at the lines on her face. The corners of her mouth turned ever so slightly up, like she knew something I didn't. The house didn't feel empty after. It felt full of her scent in the blankets, her hum in the hallway, her stories tucked into every drawer and box. She left everything in perfect order. A sealed envelope with my name on it on the desk upstairs. Inside just one line, "Don't go far this time." I didn't. I stayed. Kept the house. Painted the porch. Started a garden she always said she wanted but never got around to. Neighbors came by more often. Brought pie, shared memories. One even called her, "the last real heartbeat on this street." I like that. I still write her sometimes. Not letters exactly, just thoughts. Scribbled in a journal I keep in the kitchen drawer. And sometimes, when I make too much soup or fold laundry in silence, I catch myself smiling at nothing in particular. Because I remember. I remember the toast. The puzzles. The snow. I remember that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is come home. Not to fix what's broken. Not to chase what's gone. But to hold what's still here. To love what waits in the quiet. And to stay.